Welcome to Audiobook 365 Stories.
Once there was a king who had a big kingdom and 3 sons. One day, the king became blind, and no doctor could help him see again. An old woman came to the palace and said there was only one thing that could make him see again: a bird named Grip. She said the bird's song would open the king's eyes. When the king's oldest son heard this, he offered to go and get the bird Grip. The bird was kept in a cage by another king in a different country, and it was guarded carefully because it was a great treasure. The blind king was very happy that his son wanted to go, so he gave him the best things he could and sent him on his way. The prince traveled for a while and then came to an inn. Inside, there were many people who were happy, drinking, singing, and playing games. The prince liked this happy life so much that he stayed at the inn. He forgot about his blind father and the bird Grip. The king waited for his son to come back. He hoped but was also worried. As time passed and he did not hear from his son, the second prince asked if he could go and find his brother and bring back the bird Grip. The king agreed and sent him off in the same way. But when the second prince reached the same inn and saw his brother having fun, he stayed too, forgetting about the bird Grip and their father. The king became very sad when neither son returned. He lost hope of seeing again and worried about his 2 sons. Then, the youngest son came to him and offered to go find his brothers and bring back the bird Grip. The king did not want to risk losing his 3rd son, but the prince begged, so the king finally said yes. He sent the youngest prince off with the best things for his journey. The youngest prince also came to the same inn where his brothers were. When they saw him, they asked him to stay and have fun, but he said he needed to get the bird Grip for their father. He said goodbye to his brothers and went on his way. After riding for a long time, it started to get dark, and he came to a house deep in the forest. The owner welcomed him and took care of his horse. Inside, while he was eating, the prince heard terrible cries from the next room. He asked the maid what was happening. She said the cries came every night from a dead man the host had killed because he could not pay for his food. The host refused to bury the man because he had no money for a funeral. The girl then showed the prince a knife and an axe, and the prince understood the host wanted him to choose how to die unless he paid to save his life. The prince gave the host a lot of money for his own life and paid the dead man's debt and for the burial. The host promised to bury the dead body now. The prince felt that his life was not safe in the murderer's inn, so he asked the maid to help him escape that night. She said trying to escape might risk her life since the stable key was under the host's pillow. But because she was also a prisoner there, she agreed to help him if he promised to take her with him. The prince agreed, and they managed to escape from the inn. They rode until they reached another inn far away, where the prince found a safe place for the girl. He then continued on his journey alone. As the prince rode through a forest, he met a fox. The fox greeted him and asked where he was going and what he was doing. The prince said his mission was too important to tell a stranger. "You are right," said the fox, "because you are looking for the bird Grip to help your blind father. I can help you, but you must follow my advice." The prince thought this was a good offer, especially since the fox was ready to go with him and show him the way to the castle where the bird Grip was kept in a cage. He promised to listen to the fox's advice. When they reached the castle, the fox gave the prince 3 gold grains. He told the prince to throw 1 grain into the guard room, another into the room where the bird Grip was, and the 3rd into the bird's cage. After that, he could take the bird, but he must not touch it or something bad would happen. The prince took the gold grains and promised to follow the fox's instructions. When he reached the guard room, he threw one grain inside, and the guards fell asleep. The same happened in the room with the bird grip. When he threw the third grain into the cage, the bird fell asleep too. The prince picked up the bird, but he couldn't resist touching it. The bird woke up and started screaming. The noise woke everyone in the castle, and the prince was caught. Sitting in his cell, the prince was sad that his mistake had caused trouble and lost the chance for his father to see again. Suddenly, the fox appeared. The prince was happy to see the fox and listened quietly as the fox scolded him. He promised to be more obedient in the future if the fox would help him again. The fox agreed and told the prince that when he was brought to trial, he should answer yes to all the judge's questions. The prince did as the fox said. When the judge asked if he had meant to steal the bird grip, he said, yes. When the judge asked if he was a master thief, he said, yes again. When the king heard this, he said he would forgive the prince for trying to steal the bird if he would go to the next kingdom and bring back the most beautiful princess in the world. The prince agreed and said, yes. When he left the castle, the fox met him again and went with him to the next kingdom. Near the castle, the fox gave the prince 3 more gold grains. He told the prince to throw one into the guard room, another into the princess's room, and the third into her bed. He also warned the prince not to kiss the princess. The prince did as the fox told him, and everyone fell asleep. But when he saw the princess's beauty, he forgot the fox's warning and kissed her. The princess and everyone else in the castle woke up, and the prince was captured again and put into a strong dungeon. The fox returned to the prince and scolded him for not listening, but he promised to help him again if he answered yes to everything at his trial. The prince agreed and told the judge that he had intended to steal the princess and was a master thief. When the king heard this, he said he would forgive the prince if he went to the next kingdom and stole a horse with 4 golden shoes. The prince agreed. The prince met the fox after leaving the castle, and they traveled together again. When they reached the next castle, the fox gave the prince 3 more gold grains. The fox told him to throw 1 grain into the guard room, another into the stable, and the last into the horse's stall. The fox warned him not to touch the golden saddle hanging above the horse's stall, or he would get into more trouble, and the fox would no longer be able to help him. The prince promised to follow the fox's instructions this time. He threw the gold grains in the right places, making everyone fall asleep, and untied the horse. But then he noticed the golden saddle. The prince thought it was perfect for such a beautiful horse with golden shoes. As he reached out to take the saddle, an invisible force struck his arm, making it numb. He remembered his promise and the danger he would face, so he led the horse out without touching the saddle again. The fox was waiting outside and scolded him for nearly disobeying again. The prince admitted he had been tempted but had learned his lesson. As they traveled, the prince told the fox he couldn't stop thinking about the beautiful princess. He asked if the fox thought she should ride the horse with the golden shoes back to his father's palace. The fox agreed and said this would be a great idea. The fox then gave the prince 3 more gold grains and told him how to take the princess from the castle without waking anyone. The prince promised not to kiss the princess this time and carefully followed the fox's instructions. He threw the grains into the right places and everyone fell asleep. He took the princess from the castle, set her on the beautiful horse, and they continued on their way. When they neared the castle where the bird Grip was, the prince asked the fox for 3 more gold grains. The fox gave him the grains and instructions to take the bird. This time the prince did everything correctly. He took the bird without waking anyone and left the castle. Now the prince was full of joy. His blind father would get his sight back, and he had the most beautiful princess and a horse with golden shoes. The prince and princess traveled happily together, and the fox followed them until they reached the forest where they first met. "This is where we part," said the fox. "You now have everything you wanted. You will have a safe journey to your father's palace if you do not pay to save anyone's life." The prince thanked the fox for all his help, promised to heed his advice, said farewell, and continued on his way with the princess beside him and the bird Grip on his wrist. The prince and the princess arrived at the inn where his 2 elder brothers had stayed. But instead of merriment, the inn was now draped in black. The prince learned that 2 princes were to be hanged for debt, as they had squandered their money on feasting and gambling. Realizing these were his brothers, the prince felt sorrowful. He paid their debts to save their lives. At first, the brothers were grateful, but their gratitude soon turned to jealousy when they saw the prince's treasures. The bird Grip, the beautiful princess, and the horse with golden shoes. They plotted to kill the prince, take the treasures, and return them to their blind father. They tricked the prince into a den of lions and abandoned him there. They then took the princess, the bird, and the horse and headed home, threatening the princess to claim that they had won the treasures. Upon their return, the brothers were celebrated as heroes. However, the king was devastated to hear that his youngest son had been hanged for debt. The joy over the treasures quickly faded. The bird Grip refused to sing, the princess cried endlessly, and no one dared to approach the horse with the golden shoes. In the lion's den, the prince met the fox again. The lions, instead of attacking, were friendly. The fox was not angry but warned the prince that his brother's betrayal showed they would betray anyone, including their own brother. The fox then gave the prince advice on how to regain his rights. The prince was deeply grateful. The fox asked one last favor, to cut off his head. Although shocked, the prince refused to harm his friend. The fox insisted, saying it was the only way to help him. Reluctantly, the prince complied, and the fox transformed into a young man. The young man revealed that he was the dead man whom the prince had buried at the inn. Because of the prince's kindness, he had helped him. Disguised as a horseshoer, the prince went to his father's palace. The palace staff needed someone who could handle the horse with the golden shoes. The prince showed the horse's golden shoes, making the horse stand calmly. Next, the prince asked to see the bird Grip, saying he could make it sing. The staff took him to the chamber where the bird was kept with the weeping princess. When the prince spoke to the bird, it began to sing, and the princess smiled. The king's sight returned, and he recognized his youngest son. The princess told the king about the betrayal of the elder brothers. They were banished from the kingdom. The youngest prince married the princess and received the horse with the golden shoes and half the kingdom. The king kept the bird Grip, which now sang joyfully for him and his court.